In North Carolina, we're talking possum droppings, an actual dropping of a wild animal at midnight. Like the Times Square ball drop on New Year's Eve, only replace the Big Apple with a live possum. PETA thinks it's cruel, but in North Carolina they laugh. Saving the New Year's Eve possum, next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this behind-the-scenes look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. Here we talk to the key players at PETA and the movement and ask them about how animal rights change their lives and how they stay motivated to make the world a better place for the animals. On today's episode, New Year's Eve, were you thinking Times Square or around Brasstown or Andrews, North Carolina? They don't drop a ball there, they drop a possum, a real live possum.
It's like you wouldn't do this to your own cat or dog, let alone, a truly wild animal not accustomed to being near people with the kind of noise and the kind of commotion. It's a terrifying experience.
When I saw that, it reminded me of a public lynching. It reminded me of something far more terroristic, and I was just appalled at the idea that they would do this to a poor wild animal.
You put your finger exactly on it. It's sort of a mob mentality. You wouldn't think it's still possible.
Martina Bernstein is senior litigation counsel for PETA, and she's talking about an actual act of cruelty that PETA has been fighting for years, even offered a humane replacement. But Clay and Judy Logan, who used the annual possum drop on New Year's Eve to promote their convenience store, have fought it, and then they had a law installed to protect the act of cruelty. It's no joke. They used an Opossum Right to Work Act to preempt animal cruelty laws. Last year, an opossum was hurt, and the local activists in Andrews and Brasstown, North Carolina, are trying to stop it. But the Logans vowed to drop another possum on New Year's Eve. Here's my conversation with PETA's Martina Bernstein on the PETA Podcast. So, Martina, tell me about the possum dropping. Who came up with this, and why is it a thing?
As to who came up with this was really just, let's say, about 20 years ago. In this little town of Brasstown, North Carolina, was a mom and pop store, like just a convenience store that was run by a couple. And they decided just to invite some friends and drop a figurine of an opossum from the roof for New Year's Eve. Why they thought of that, nobody knows. It didn't, there wasn't like a tradition beforehand. But for some reason, they then decided it would be a good idea to have this with their friends every year with a live opossum.
A live one. And this is like a real animal inside a kind of, is it a cage or a box? What is it?
Something like a plexiglass with, tinsel around it, and you can see the opossum inside.
So the opossum is on display, being raised up to the heavens at, say, 10 o'clock at night, and it's going to drop at midnight, sort of like the Times Square ball in New York, right?
Exactly. Except, as you said, it's a live animal. And not only that, but, one that is a wild animal, not used to being around people.
So this is an animal that they trapped specifically for this, or is it an animal that was like the same one, like the Groundhog Day, Punxsutawney Phil? Is it kind of like I think they use a different groundhog for Groundhog's Day, but I guess they trap an opossum just for this occasion?
They do. And that in itself, like with a leg hold trap, can cause some very serious injuries to the opossum, which, I don't understand how people can have fun doing that. But the fact of the matter is the last opossum had to have its leg amputated because it was, damaged from just being captured for the event with a trap.
So Clay and Judy Logan, they own Clay's Corner. And like you said, it's a convenience store in Brasstown. When did PETA hear about it? And were you successful in stopping it?
Yes, we were. We found out about it from some locals who told us about it. And when we looked into it, it turns out that they weren't allowed to do that, which is not much of a surprise. That there's laws that would prevent them from doing that.
What specific laws?
Well, at the time when we first challenged the event, there was a law that says if you wanted to have a wild animal, such as a possum in captivity, you have to get a captivity permit from the, state wildlife commission. Unless you have a permit, you just can't, go have a wild animal on display, captured and it makes sense. So we were able to show there was no such permit, which made the event illegal. And we thought that was the end of that, but it wasn't.
Well, what did they do? How did they fight it?
Clay Logan had a friend in the legislature who introduced what they called the Possum Right to Work Act, where they basically explained...
Wait a minute. The Possum Right to Work Act?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And within weeks of the judge ruling that they needed this, that they couldn't have it without a permit, that it was illegal, they basically enacted a law saying, you don't really need a license. And that was the Possum Right to Work Act. PETA challenged the law on the obvious grounds that you can't just because you know somebody in the legislature and you don't want to be held liable for improper conduct. So you just, make a law saying you're exempt from this. We said that you just can't do that. There is such a thing as the Constitution. You can't just protect people who you want to protect and allow them to do illegal things that are unlawful. The final law was upheld by the court. But there was a panel of judges who said, yep, it's constitutional. You can do whatever you want to an opossum during certain times of the year, and there isn't anything that PETA can do about it, or anybody else can do about it, because it's all lawful.
So they made it an opossum-free zone for a period of the year, like New Year's Eve, that allowed them to do this.
Right. It's that there was a movie called The Purge. One day out of the premise was one day out of the year, everything was legal. And it was basically like that. During that time, whatever you want to do with or to an opossum in North Carolina is lawful. It requires no license. It doesn't matter if people get injured. That's just the way it is.
And what about the Possum Right to Work Act? Did they rescind that, or is that still on the books too?
Well, what they did is they didn't really rescind it, but they enacted a law on top of that saying during this period of time, no law applies. So that, the animal cruelty law doesn't apply, the licensing, for captive animals doesn't apply. So they basically, on top of that law, enacted this statute saying anything goes. Anywhere in North Carolina. It was basically, they kept adjusting the legal theory based on the arguments that PETA raised in court, and where the judges says, yes, that makes sense. Yes, that makes sense. So they eventually said, well, we'll just make a blanket. Everything goes. No law applies.
So this thing moved from Brasstown, North Carolina, where Clay's Corner, the convenience store, was located. They moved it to Andrews, North Carolina, for a slightly bigger town, I think, when Clay Logan, the convenience store owner, retired. And now they got this new law passed. So are they going to do it again this year?
It's not entirely clear, because now the locals are divided into two groups. One group says it's really, you shouldn't do it because, see what you did last year where you really injured this poor opossum. And there's this other group still thinking, it doesn't really hurt the opossum and we want to have our fun. So it's not clear, except there's this law in the book that says nobody can complain to the court about it. It's really up to the citizens if they want to do something or not.
And you said that there are some locals who are very against this, animal rights activists who they expose the fact that the opossum was harmed. Tell me about the local activists who are fighting on the ground.
After it became clear last year that these poor animals really suffer as a result of the drop, they've now, there are people in the, in Logan's community and in Brasstown and the surrounding communities that say, really, we don't have to be still stuck in the Middle Ages and enjoy ourselves by torturing this animal. So they've been trying to persuade the mayor of Andrews not to do it again, to persuade Clay Logan to accept a stuffed animal instead of, using a live animal. And they've been very vocal in petitioning the legislature actually to repeal the law that allows this event to happen.
There's one woman in particular you said was instrumental in discovering or exposing the fact that the opossum was hurt and had to have her leg amputated.
Yes. This is Beth Sparks. She lives in the area, and after the opossum was released basically from this cage, after it was dropped on New Year's Eve, she got a hold of the opossum and was able to get it the kind of, treatment from a veterinarian it desperately needed. And she has circulated pictures and petitions showing how this animal suffered. And she's a longtime opossum rehabilitator, so she has a good bit of knowledge about this.
She's a possum rehabilitator?
Yeah. Sometimes opossums get attacked by dogs or get run over by cars, and then for example, the opossum mommy might be, having, in her pouch may have survivors, little baby possums, and she would take care of these animals and release them when they're able. Before
that, everyone thought that the opossums it was a fun thing, it was safe, and nothing happened to the opossum. The opossum was virtually unscathed, unharmed, not terrorized at all, huh?
Right. It was like a big joke. Oh, never mind. And, it's just an opossum and we'll release it back into the wild after it's done. Yeah, it was just a big joke.
But it was anything but. And, people can go online and they could see examples of what it looks like. And when you see the opossum lifted up, you see that it's not raining, but it looks like maybe the opossum is urinating out of fear or, is clearly traumatized by being lifted up.
There's no question about it. And the experts in the field have said so. It's like you wouldn't do this to your own cat or dog, let alone, a truly wild animal not accustomed to being near people with the kind of noise and the kind of commotion. It's a terrifying experience.
And when I saw that, what I was reminded of was not the ball dropping in Times Square, New York. When I saw that, it reminded me of a public lynching. It reminded me of something far more terroristic, and I was just appalled at the idea that they would do this to a poor wild animal. And that this is 2019, they're doing it to a poor wild animal. What would they have been doing in 1930 or 1940 or 1950?
Mm-hmm. You put your finger exactly on it. It's sort of a mob mentality. You wouldn't think it's still possible, let alone having laws protect that kind of a lynching.
And yet no one takes it seriously. They go to the legislature, they have the law change, or they put a new law on top of it that essentially negates all the laws that are on the books to protect animals. Now, what's PETA doing now? What are they going to do now about 2019 or 2020?
First of all, when you say nobody takes it seriously, even the court made fun of this situation when it said in its opinion, the Lorax can speak for the trees, but PETA cannot speak for the opossums. I don't know if you remember the Lorax children's book where the Lorax spoke for the trees, and the court thought it was just hilarious, apparently, that PETA cannot speak up for the opossum because, the law allows people to do whatever they want to do.
What's the next step that PETA can take now legally?
Well, legally, our hands are tied. There's no question about it because the court said we won't hear any complaints from PETA because no matter, what you want to do here to the opossum at this event, it's all lawful. So legally, nothing can be done. But that still leaves, I think, public opinion, public awareness, making sure that people are aware of how the opossum suffers, that this is not good, clean fun, and that there are many ways to have fun without harming an innocent animal and scaring him or her to death or causing it to be trapped in a trap that literally bites off the foot or the leg of the animal.
Ideas spread like wildfire, even bad ones. And this one went from Brasstown, North Carolina, to a larger town, Andrews, North Carolina, basically from the same germ from the Clay's Corner convenience store. And now it's
like an infection.
Like an infection. Now it's spread to the Atlanta area. Tallapoosa, Georgia has something like this. It has a big celebration. They've got Atlanta TV personalities hosting it. Crowds of as many as 7,000 have been there. Is PETA doing anything to stop that?
I'm glad you brought that up. That event originally had a live opossum, and originally PETA pointed out to the good people in Georgia that the opossum suffered, and they immediately recognized the logic of it. And for the past 15 or so years, they've used a taxidermied opossum. So they have a tradition, and it's very successful, way more successful than Brasstown. And for year after year, what they're using is the same stuffed animal.
Well, so it's no different than like a regular effigy or some kind. It's a humane possum dropping.
Exactly. And all it needed back then was for PETA just, to tell them, to point out, wait a minute, the animal suffers. Why don't you use something, like a stuffed animal? And in response to PETA many years ago, they gave that up. So they still have the event, but no opossum suffers. For some reason, we've tried that with Clay Logan saying, we actually have a stuffed opossum for you to use.
So in Tallapoosa, they use a stuffed opossum. It's okay. It's humane. But some people just insist, like the Brasstown folks that have moved on to Andrews, North Carolina. They even got the legislature in the act to try to stop PETA's idea to make this more humane. Why do you think some people hang on?
For the life of me, I cannot understand the logic behind it. I don't know how that could bring anyone joy during, an event that should be joyful. I don't understand. I truly am at a loss to figure it out.
What can people listening to this, if they know that this thing exists, what can they do to try to stop it? There's no plans yet. They haven't announced, so maybe they won't have it. Maybe maybe in North Carolina, they've given it up, or maybe they've just the interest is gone.
The easiest way to prevent this from happening is for the legislature to see the light and realize that they made a terrible mistake, thinking that this was all just fun and games, but really they're allowing animal cruelty to happen. So the legislature has it in its power to put an end to it just like that. They're
the ones who put the law in place, right?
Right. But apparently not really thinking about it, not really knowing, they were sold a bill of goods saying, the opossum really doesn't suffer. And they thought, it's harmless. If they realize, for example, what happened to Millie, having her leg amputated and being a cripple for the rest of her life, they might think differently.
Is PETA poised to take any kind of legal action at this point, or is it really up to the activists on the ground now?
It's up to the activists on the ground because, legally, if you have a law that says you can do anything you want, you can't go to court and say, oh, they broke the law. So at this point, it's a legislative means, basically trying to persuade the legislature to, repeal that law, or to appeal to the good people of Brasstown not to hold the event, or Andrews not to hold the event.
So now that Clay and Judy Logan have apparently retired, maybe they've given up, huh?
No, they haven't. They have basically vowed they would continue. Their sons have said they would continue. They haven't really stated that they will have the event, but they also haven't stated that they're retiring from having it. So there's no indication that they have seen the light, but perhaps their sons might be inclined to not follow in their footsteps.
Well, who knows? They might find a stuffed replica opossum that will fit the bill.
And PETA is happy to provide one.
Yeah. Do you have one at the ready that you can send over there?
Well, I have, I know of a rehabber here in Los Angeles who has the opossum, a stuffed opossum that was used in the film Pet Sematary. Apparently they used the stuffed opossum in that movie. And here in, Los Angeles, you can get your hands on pretty much anything, including that.
Yeah. You have a celebrity opossum standing by.
Absolutely.
Hey, Martina, thank you for your time. We'll be following this on New Year's Eve when we have nothing to do. No, I mean, we'll be making sure that, thank goodness in Tallapoosa, they use a fake one. Fake possum.
They've been having a lot of fun with it, obviously. Much larger crowds, too.
All right, Martina Bernstein, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, you're very welcome. Much appreciated.
Martina Bernstein, Senior Litigation Counsel for PETA, on the possum drop with the live possum used by the folks in Brasstown and Andrews, North Carolina. Local activists there trying to stop it from happening this New Year's Eve. And to the Logans, if they're listening, the offer still stands, a real celebrity stuffed possum in exchange for the real one. Go to PETA.org for more. That's our program. You can contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok, that's EMILAMOK, or on aldef.org, AALDEF.org/blog, or amok.com. Hey, once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on Apple Podcasts where you can rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. music is provided by Carbonworks. Check them out on YouTube. Thanks again for listening. Join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.